Brendan Morahan, thank you so much for joining me today on Cook's Table Podcast. This is a long-awaited conversation for me because I've admired your work from afar, and obviously we've talked at one point a couple months ago, and really enjoyed that first conversation. And yeah, have just really anticipated this day that we get to talk about this on the podcast. So it's an honor to have you here. It's an honor to have you say yes to joining me, and excited to get into it.
Yeah, great, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Only my second podcast, and I'm happy I'm doing it with you.
Second of many, it seems like.
We'll
I can
see.
only
Yeah,
imagine. I can only imagine as stuff takes off, with your newest venture in
I know.
particular,
We'll see. Yeah.
how that will happen. So, um, what I typically like to do is just give my guests the opportunity to just kind of introduce themselves to the audience. And yeah, who is Brendan Morahan? Where do you come from? What's kind of been your path so far? And what do you do? What do you do with your time these days?
Yeah, cool, man. So I graduated 2009 from college, had a job lined up with PwC in New York City. I'm from right outside of New York City in New York, but now I'm in New Jersey. Was in audit, was in hedge funds, private equity funds. Got my CPA while I was there, did 3.5 years, senior associate, and then moved into private equity because you got, double comp, double pay raise, things like that. And that was, private equity in 2000, end of 2012, I joined there and I was there till 2018, and bounced around at two different firms there. So that was cool. Like, it was good in the sense that you learn so much like stuff and you're seeing things executed at the highest level.
Hmm.
Um, but I just, by the time 2018 rolled around, I felt like I didn't have a soul anymore, honestly. Like I just felt like this corporate private equity grind and just no humanity in it since. And look, maybe that's just because I was going through a difficult period in my life at that time. I don't know, but I just felt like there had to be more to work, to profession, like to having a career than just what I was doing. So with that in mind, I had a guy I went to college with who had started a tax firm and I'm seeing him from the outside and I'm like, okay, what is
Hmm.
he doing? What, why am I a CPA? And everybody would obviously ask, oh, you're a CPA, you do taxes. And I didn't. So I started reaching out to him and I just started seeing what he was doing. And he was just doing easy tax returns. Um, and I was like, I could do this, but I don't know taxes. So I resigned from that job in 2018. I was like controller, acting CFO. By all accounts, epitome of my career accomplished by age 30, all that stuff. But like I said, I hated it. So resigned, took about a year off, where I was trying to do my own thing, with CFO type work. And maybe I didn't try super hard, but I couldn't get any clients also because they were just like, wait, why do I need like a private equity CFO? I need somebody who could do like taxes and maybe books. So I couldn't like I got a few jobs here and there, a few like short-term things, but nothing like materializing, which is when I doubled down that I needed to learn taxes because not only was I seeing my friend and I was like interested in that, but now I was seeing the real world, application of it when I'm talking to small businesses and things like that. So I was fortunate to get a job at a small firm in Connecticut. Huge pay cut, obviously, but I had a CPA, I had 11 years experience, so I did have a solid background. And that was January 2020. Spent the next 4 years bouncing between three firms because, once I got my legs under me and I learned the taxes, I guess I'm entrepreneurial by nature, but also came from that private equity world where I just saw so many things they could be doing better. So I was a fountain of ideas and we could do this. Why aren't we doing that? What if we just did this? Why are we charging late? And the first firm didn't really see it. The second firm did, and I was getting partner offers. The third firm did. I was getting partner offers, but none of the partner offers materialized. One due to a sale, one due to just a guy changing his mind. So at the end of 2023, I took that as a sign when the second one within 6 months said, all right, we're not going to do the partner thing. I was like, this is it. I'm going on my own. Like God could not be more forcing me to say, you need to do your own thing and that's what I did. So December of 2023, we had the meeting like December 15th, December 18th, my company was formed. I built my website, the initial one and all that. And it's been off to the races since.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I guess I don't hear many people go from public accounting into private equity as much. It seems like that was a unique. I don't know. I'm sure it's not entirely unique, but what was that? What was that? Obviously, you mentioned the pay jump when you made that choice, but was there another draw to that area for you out of?
Oh, you know, it's funny. I didn't know anything about it. So my parents are blue collar Irish immigrants. My dad was in the carpenters union, right? So
Okay.
I didn't know anything about business also, right? But I just got thrown into that group, right? I didn't know like now everybody knows what private equity was. I
Yeah.
swear to God, in 2009, 2010, I'd never heard of it before.
Okay.
So we just got thrown in that division at PwC because it was New York City, and that was the largest. Literally, the alternative investments was the largest audit division in New York City. So it's just like it wasn't like special luck or I'm smarter. It was just like that's where they needed the most manpower.
Sure.
And then when you're in that, you then realize, hey, you're going to work a lot. It was I don't know if this is true, but they would say it was known as like the toughest, most like brutal hour kind of thing. But the trade off was these actual private equity firms are impossible to get hired at.
Right.
They only will hire those from Big Four that worked on private equity clients. So that was the trade off. So then you have your foot in the door, and there's a lot of recruiters who are representing them, and they're reaching out to everybody in that PwC audit division and probably the other Big Four that handle them. So when you know, it's not like when you first leave and go there, it's the greatest thing ever. And I'm not acting like it was a bad job. I was a little different after 5 years or so. But
Sure.
I mean, the pay is great. You get free healthcare. You get free lunch every day. We're not talking about like a bad set, and the hours were less than Big Four. So like
Mm,
initially, it's incredible, and there were just different circumstances. I'm sure with the right place, the right situation, it would be different. But it is very unique because it's the problem is everybody tells you how great your career is and stuff, and if you don't feel that, you feel like a fraud, like you're so lucky, this is great, oh my god, he's got a great job. But I didn't feel that in my heart, at least not after like a few years. It was just a ton of stress,
mhm.
and it just felt like there was no fulfillment because I felt replaceable every day, I
Yeah.
guess. Like I felt that was one thing I think I learned when I was there. You learn a lot about business because it's small enough that a $3 billion private equity fund and firm might only have 25, 30 people employed.
Sure.
So you're literally a part of like the meetings when they're analyzing and evaluating businesses to buy and, you know, performance of these businesses, and you hear their mindsets and you hear the CEOs talk and you hear them analyze it. So if you're just a sponge and you're just listening, you'll pick up a lot of good stuff on how businesses like what they think is important, and you can't help but just learn from that.
Mhm.
Um, but like the biggest thing I learned is just cash is king. Like I had a guy once tell me just like you can like accounts receivable cannot like some businesses it has to exist obviously, right? But if somebody owes you money, like there should be nothing more important. A business doesn't exist without cash. So like that was a very cool thing to learn. And it's very true. Like I take that with me today and I tell my clients that you need to get paid and you need to get
Yeah.
paid as quickly as possible. Things like that. I'll pause there. I went off on a ramble a bit, but
No, that's great. I love that.
yeah.
Well, I'm so curious. And I do hope that a lot of CPAs watch this podcast in particular because this is, there's so much obviously that you're going to speak to related to our profession. Um, but I also, but one of the things that jumps out to me right off the bat in your story is the common story I think of kind of um, navigating the waters of other people's expectations of what a good career looks like, and
Mhm.
um, and your own heart's desire, and trying to discover who you truly are, what you're made to do, what you really enjoy. What can you say about that journey? Like, what was that like for you, navigating those waters? How did you come to the point where you were courageous enough, I guess, to make your own choice?
I mean, I think for me, I was like I almost had like a breakdown. So I was kind of like lucky in that sense where I was forced into it, where I
Mhm.
was just so unhappy, and my health was suffering, and I had gained weight, and it was one of those moments, right?
Sure.
Which is kind of better. I've learned now, like it's better to have that than to be just oh, I don't like this. I'm not fulfilled at all, but it's not hard. It's not so horrible that I have to leave.
Right.
So like I'm actually okay with it and I feel good about it. So and I have friends who still work in these places, and they do very well. And again, I'm sure they hear it all the time. They make $500,000 a year, things like that, right? But they got another 15 years minimum, 20 years of working, and they work a lot of hours and it's high stress. So I know that I shouldn't put words in their mouth. I suspect they feel similarly, where they're just not fulfilled either, because at the end of the day, um, I feel, to get back to your original question, like in your career, you have to be of service. You have to be benefiting somebody to be fulfilled. Like you have to feel like your job matters to some sense, to some extent, what you're doing, like who are you helping? And in the cases of being in private equity, it was like, okay, we are helping these we're helping get things for the auditors, so the investors, but it's all required anyway. Do the investors even care that there's an audit? Like, we had a CFO once tell me, he's like, the investors get the financials, they don't even look at them, they just go to their account page, like nobody cares. So it felt like, what are we doing all, and I get the whole argument, right? You're doing it because it provides assurance, and the investors need to feel like this is legit and it's in the partnership agreement. But it's like, at the end of the day, I had like one of these moments where I'm like, but it's all bullshit,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what is any, like, I could leave, which is true. Leave tomorrow. Nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to know. Nobody's life is going to change at all, except maybe for 2 to 3 weeks as they transition to somebody new. And then it's all just, a blink of an eye. And I felt like there was no person's life that I impacted in that journey whatsoever in a positive way. It's just like, because how could you? Okay, maybe you work really hard and you get the financials out a week early. Who cares? Like,
Mhm.
so it just felt like that was like kind of on my mind as the time was going on, and I just wanted something more, even if it was less money. And I feel like this is probably a common theme with a lot of people, even if it's just in Big Four. Like, what are you doing? You're auditing a giant, company, or doing tax returns for a giant company. Like, who at the end of the day even cares if it's you or somebody else? That's the feeling I had. And it's great if that's not your feeling, but for me, that's what it was.
Mhm. It doesn't seem like, I mean, I guess it seems like that sentiment and that story is common in the
Hmm.
CPA world. I wish it wasn't that way.
Yeah.
Like, do you have you thought about why that might be like so common in the CPA world? Maybe it's just because we're in it and that's all we hear because we're
Could be.
CPAs and we hear CPAs. Maybe there's other professions that experience that same thing. But do you have any sense for why CPAs might have that kind of
Yeah, I
wrestling?
think I think it has to do with the work a little bit too, like I'm describing. So, all right, you could think of, and other professions obviously have this, but you
Sure.
think of nurses and doctors, like it's very easy to see their benefit to people, right?
Yes.
When they save lives or they help people and people are looking at them genuinely thanking them, right? When was the last time somebody genuinely thanked you working Big Four for a company in accounting? But like genuinely, not just like, thanks for getting me that. It
Right.
doesn't really happen, right? So we all have souls, we all have hearts, and I think that keeps pulling at us. And then you have all your family and friends, or a lot of them, telling you how great you're doing. So you just have, like, I think that also pulls at it, because you feel like a fraud, because you're like,
Yes.
wait, like, can I like, all these people are telling me how lucky I am, how good this is, yada yada. And I don't feel it. And now I have to just kind of nod, because if I disagree with them, then I feel like they'll look at me like I'm ungrateful, and or that I'm just not being whatever it is, right? But ungrateful, I guess, is the word I think of. And then
Hmm.
you feel like a fraud, that you have to lie and say, yeah, yeah, good thing. Because if you complain, then you look like a jackass, because
Sure.
that person's not making as much as you, and they look up to you that you're doing better. So I think it's just this maybe like, I don't know, an identity crisis, where
Yeah.
it just doesn't, the feelings don't match what the outside people see.
Sure. I had a similar moment where I had a mix of personal circumstances and just work circumstances at one point in my career early on, actually, for me. And it was to your point, it was health issues, and it was like a bit of a breakdown, and the
Yeah.
wheels fell off, and I was like, okay, what just happened? What is the where does this lead me? And it forced my hand, and I
Yeah.
believe in hindsight, a providential and great way, right, to move me to what I'm closer to what I'm doing now, and
Sure.
take the next step in my career. But I'm curious, and you spoke to this. It says like it's almost better that way, because you
Absolutely.
have a clean break.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
do you think what would you offer up as advice now on the flip side of that, to the younger generation of up and coming CPAs? There's not many of them. Those that are coming up,
Yeah.
right, and are in the pipeline now. Like, how do they stay ahead of something like that? Like, is there anything you would
Yeah.
say?
I mean, I think it's there's so much out there now to be of content of people who have especially lived through it and who are speaking about it like myself or like you,
Sure.
right? So I think it's one to be mindful of it and also to recognize like you are replaceable no matter what. So just be careful where your loyalties lie. With these larger companies especially, right? So knowing that, I would say you always got to look out for yourself. So just think I think the best piece of advice I could give is always be like, if something catastrophic happened tomorrow and you lose your job, could you survive on your own? Like, could you go
Right.
out and get work on like that? I think is the biggest skill set and most important thing I would take away because actually we have insane skills that we can rely on our own. So
Hmm.
I think I would just encourage people to really think about how they would survive on their own. Should they get fired and AI takes over everything and they can't get hired at anywhere else? Like, what skills do you have that you've been building that you could go out and get clients on your own and do something? And maybe it's CFO work and maybe it's tax work, or maybe you realize you don't have that because you're niched and specialized in like state and local tax for major billion-dollar companies. And you need to kind of branch out of that to get broader experience. And that's something I've seen too, where people just they move up the ranks, but they're so specialized in something very specific that they couldn't really, it would be very difficult to start their own company or firm or be self-employed.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's just being aware of that and being ready to pivot. And I just have a very sinister take on employers, larger employers, because I've been kind of, wronged in certain ways. Not that I hold any of them like, it's fine. I'm where I am now and I'm great. But like I've just heard so many stories, seen so many stories. And by the way, I don't think they're really hiding it. It's a job, it's a transactional thing, and
Right.
you need to treat it as such. And you just need to be doing the same thing and
Hmm.
looking out for yourself more than anything because look, you could be lucky and you could want to work nonstop and sacrifice family and just keep moving up and you'll do fine. But guess what? Even in that scenario, you could do that for 15 years. And the second you need 4 months, of slow time because of a family emergency or something, just watch, and then you don't come back working the 60 hours a week. It's going to be pretty quick before they turn on you. And that's
Hmm.
what people need to, I think, be aware of and recognize also. So always just be looking out for yourself and just planning ahead and even early on. Just think about it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, that's a great perspective, and yeah, what a story, honestly. I'm thinking about yeah, the moment that you went and you had gotten some closed doors with partnership offers, and you were like, gonna start your own firm. That obviously is the beginning of like the latest entrepreneurial venture for you, it seems like to me. But what about that entrepreneurial thread was had an earlier genesis for you? Did you have any of that kind of stirring for you in like before you were in college, like any of that you could see or trace back?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Which is funny, right? Like,
Yeah.
but so I grew up. I guess the background matters, right? I was mentioning before, my parents are immigrants from Ireland. They grew up poor. My dad was a union carpenter, yada, yada.
Sure.
And we were taught, my mom was one of 11 kids. My dad's one of six kids.
Okay.
All of them worked. All my aunts, all my uncles worked for unions and companies. And the prevailing thought, there's no entrepreneurs in the family. And there's like 40 first cousins. Okay. Because the prevailing thought was it was a boomer mentality, right? It's you get with a company, you stay there until like, you retire and you get a pension or retirement and they give you benefits and you just work hard your whole life at that company. So I never even had a thought of this. I didn't even know anybody who owned their own businesses. It wasn't even on my radar. Private equity, when I joined there, that was the first opportunity that I started seeing. And I because when we would have these offsite meetings once a year where you met with all the companies that we owned, and the CEOs and key management, and you're at dinner with them. So some of them, they're younger, and you get along with them, and you talk and you chit chat and you talk and you hear their stories, and it's so cool,
Yeah.
and I don't want to like share some of the stories, but like you just sit there and you're like, dude, you did that. And it's just like you hear them, and you start just thinking. And then I remember it started to hit me when it was probably 2017 when I started getting the bug, because now I had 5 years in private equity and I'm seeing how businesses get built and operate. And I'm seeing that a lot of times it's by people who are no smarter than me. But they were willing to take the risk.
Mm.
Um, so at that point in time, because I was, feeling miserable and I wanted to do something different, that's when the thoughts started happening. And that's when I started researching. Again, I was a CPA. I didn't know how you would even start a company. What do you do? Like, and I post about this sometimes. I'm like, you should be able to guide somebody from start to finish, but what type of entity? How do you even form it? Do you do it with the federal government, with the state? Like, I didn't know any of this.
Mhm.
So like that started my journey of research and YouTube videos and just asking myself these questions. Anyway, but that's really when it started, probably 2016, 2017. Prior to that, never had the thought in my life. Like, honestly, never in my life.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a unique story as well. I
Because a
mean,
lot of people will have it like high school, they're starting their little business or something,
right.
making cash. Not me. No.
Hey, yeah, that's cool though. Now on the flip side of it, as you're running a business, like when you think about owning a business and starting a business, and the fun you've had, and the also the challenges, I'm sure, and what appeals to you the most about the practice of entrepreneurship?
Oh, I think it's amazing. I think it's the ultimate expression of freedom.
Mm,
I love it. I love everything about it. I love everybody who does it. There's a certain passion and just camaraderie amongst those who I feel like go out on their own and have the
sure.
courage to do it. And it energizes me. Like every client I talk to who has their own business, hearing their stories. As you probably know, like the clients that we get in the small business space, they're awesome stories,
Yeah.
and it's businesses that I never would think of starting, like fire sprinkler repairs and maintenance, the sewer and septic, like hospital bed, repair maintenance. And these are people making a lot of money, by the way. So that's
Right.
what makes it even cooler. It's not like these are people making 100, 200 grand. They're making double, triple, quadruple that and doing things their own way without most of them without college degrees. I find it fascinating. So I love, and it's kind of just that freedom aspect, taking a bet on yourself, taking like a risk and believing in something and going, like having the courage to actually go do it and take that risk, and it pays off. Um, but getting back to the ultimate like freedom aspect, it's just I don't have any I don't have any reliance, I guess, or can't think of the right word right now, but
Dependence.
yeah, like on employers, I don't trust them. All right.
Mm,
So it's kind of also that aspect where it's like you should be capable of figuring something out on your own, because otherwise your life is in the hands of somebody who at the end of the day they're looking out for themselves. So you can never fully feel secure and safe. And I also feel like, especially when it comes to accounting, it's riskier to stay at a company than it is to start your own thing today, because everything you
yeah.
could do remote, the technology's there, and you could get laid off at any time. But if you have your own, just even if you start small, you're going to slowly build clients by default, especially with all these mergers and more businesses being started and more remote younger people needing and wanting younger, CPAs to guide them and CFOs and all this stuff. So I actually think it's way less risky, this path, assuming you could know what you're doing. But I
Yeah.
did, and it's so much more fulfilling. Back to that initial point, one meeting with a client my first year where I helped them out, where they were on like the verge of divorce. They had back taxes for a few years, and I had it all done within 10, 14 days. It wasn't that difficult, but like it was causing they had two babies at home, stress, like the gratitude expressed by them, the look in their eyes, the thank you, and like I didn't think it was that big. Like it wasn't difficult at all. It was very simple. Okay, let me grab this. Let me like, but that like clearly that was more like gratification, fulfillment than my prior, 15-year career combined.
Mm,
And that's what kind of drives me a little bit is like those moments where you can't feel that in if you're working for a large company. It doesn't really
totally.
happen, but you could feel that at least a dozen times a year doing it in this where you're really genuinely connecting with somebody and helping them.
Yeah. That's good and such a relatable experience. Like
Yeah.
even in my first year, I tell you, like it is astounding and so encouraging for
Hmm.
myself in my own practice as well. Um, the other thing that I'm so curious about, and it certainly has resonated with me over the last 10, 11 months as I've gotten started, has just been the increase, I think, in self-discovery along the way. I'm still
Mm.
pretty young in my career too, of like what what am I feel like I'm consistently learning new things about myself, like what
Hmm.
I prefer to do, what I'm really good at, how like I'm wired in different ways. What would you say have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned about yourself as you've taken the plunge in entrepreneurship over the last several years?
Yeah. I guess a few like just a few random things. One, I only realized like in the last 2 weeks, like my true branding messaging. Like it's changed several times, but now I
Okay.
feel like, okay, there's something, this is really what I want to do, and this is the target client profile. 2.5 years in. I finally feel like this is what I really want to do moving forward. But I think it's I figured out from a schedule I think I figured out how to not get burnt out.
Mm,
Now look, we're going to have our first child next month. I don't have children yet, so it's easier, but like schedule wise, like waking up in the morning, going to the gym, prioritizing health. And what I personally do is I have like a break up my day from like 7:30 to 10:30 a.m. is like high productive hours. But then honestly, like 11 to 2, 3 p.m. is I call it like playing defense, where I'll respond to emails, I'll help manage my team, I'll respond to their messages, and if nobody's reaching out, I'm just watching content. I'm taking a nap. I'm kind of just, floating around and taking time for me. And then later in the afternoon, early evening, if I want, I get high productive hours again. I get another burst of energy. So I could never, schedule my day like that if I worked
sure.
for somebody else in a corporate type environment. But I do feel like I'm basically getting 2 full work days done every day while working like 5 hours a day, if that
Wow.
makes any sense. So
Yep.
that just kind of, being able to kind of figure out, and I kind of stumbled upon that, realizing, and then I saw a lot of like science and data to back it up, being like, you have to kind of know your body and your mind and what your high productive hours are. And you're like, we all typically have this. We have lower productive times during the day versus high productive. And just making sure, and if you schedule a big meeting during those low kind of energy hours, you're not going to want to do the meeting. You're not going to be fully energized or passionate. So that's why I don't do it. You'll never see me schedule a meeting between 10:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. It'll never. I could show you my calendar. There's not a single meeting ever,
Yeah.
because I know those are lunch happens and you drag after So that was a big thing, and just I think the confidence to trust myself, to trust my judgment, and I was kind of proven right about all the recommendations I was trying to make to these other firms, the CPA firms, the smaller ones I worked at, and my ideas to be like, okay, I was right about all of this, or
Mm,
or a lot of it, not all of it. I shouldn't say that. But feeling like I'm validated and confident that I can do this. I know what I'm doing, and the proof is there.
mm, yeah. Oh, that makes total sense, and I feel like I'm in the midst of that actually, Brennan. Like with the
Hmm.
energy, the learnings about the energy and
Yeah,
structuring days and that type of thing. It's obviously a wild west when you get outside the traditional 8 to 5. And it's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
no, you got all the choices in the world. And actually, at my stage of life too, I have a lot more free time, not being married, not having a kid yet, or anything
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
And so it is. Sometimes it just tends to be like work all the time. Like
right,
there's no break at all.
yeah,
But in the pursuit of balance, I would say that's one of the biggest learnings and a
yeah,
really interesting conversation I've been having with several people about, like, hey, when is the best time, and how do I maximize this, and how do I achieve some type of balance in the midst of even the intensity of starting a firm, right? And we
yeah.
have the
I'll
luxury of
even say, for working during the weeks, I don't mind putting in 1 to 3 hours on a Saturday and another
Right.
hour on a Sunday in the middle of the day because I'm not busy. If that's going to alleviate me during the week, I don't want to work late. I want to have dinner with my wife. I want to wake up and go to the gym. I'm fine working a couple hours on the weekend if it's going to de-stress my week and make sure that I can do all these things. That's a difference too, I think, where I really don't mind at all because I'm bored a lot of the weekends anyway. And it's like, okay, an hour here to, and they're uninterrupted. So I get a ton done.
Hmm.
But it's learning that too, where it's like, I don't think I worked more than 50 hours a week during this tax season, like any of the weeks. But I did work Saturdays and Sundays, but it's just looks a little different. I never worked past 9 hours really during the week, but that's because I was putting in some hours on the weekends and things like that.
Mm, yeah. Love it. That makes
Yeah.
sense. As you've gone through this process of starting your own firm, what have been some of the most helpful resources that you've come across? Books, podcasts, creators, like that type of thing. Like, what would you point? Could be general business, could be focused on tax. I mean, what are your go-tos?
I never, I don't know. I'm a little unique, I guess. So I was never a big reader in
Okay.
school or a study guy. So I watched YouTube. And I don't even know the guy's name. There was one guy that I used to watch, and I don't even know his name anymore, but he was like somebody who was promoting, like, hey, you could do your own firm, you could do things like that. But if I had to be honest, like, the only people would be once I started, I got on LinkedIn and I saw people like Logan Graff and Jason Stats. Um, Literally, like, nobody else. Like, there's no other books, there's no podcast, there's no, um, yeah, there's none. I did used to listen to some of the podcasts that people would do. Kelly Roars used to have one I used to listen to. She no longer does it. Just in general, to get like kind of understanding of how people are doing things and running firms. But I'd be lying if I tried to sound smart and say I listened to a bunch of things. It was more, my experience, I think, is different than a lot of people. And I'm fortunate for that. Like, I saw how businesses, and even in when I say I worked in private equity, these are 20 to 30 person firms where I'm doing all the internal accounting and finance. So I know how that's a small business, even though they're managing billions of dollars, right?
Right.
There's a small payroll of 20 people. There's, a building, there's office expense. Like, so I felt, and we were doing it at the highest level because they're private equity guys looking at their own numbers and things like that. So I felt like I had a really good understanding of that. Of how a business should be run and how it could be run at the highest level. And then, taking that and seeing what other firms did wrong or at the smaller firms I worked at also, I was in upper management. So I
Sure.
was part of like, I was kind of a partner without being the partner. I shared offices with them and we talked about everything and management decisions. So I just felt very strongly, I guess. I mean, a little bit of a different position than somebody who 5 years in, who, takes a bet on themselves, who was never at like an upper management level, or, if they go out on their own, they're probably going to need a lot more help and resources than maybe I did. Not to sound like that, but it's true just based on my
Totally.
experience. So I just, I luckily, I guess, fortunately, but no, I didn't really read or anything. I downloaded Audible books for a bunch of things, and I'll listen to it for like 20 minutes, and then they're all just on, a lot of time remaining. Like all the like good to great traction, all these ones, but I
Yeah.
never, nah.
No, I got you. I got you. Well, for you, it's truly like I'm thinking about your private equity experience, and then just, I mean, at this point, having served so many small businesses, it's like you're getting a business masterclass,
Yeah,
through all of those,
yeah,
things. Like some
yeah.
people pick it up through book smarts, like they're just readers or whatever. Some people are like going to be podcasters. Some people just live it, and it sounds like
Hmm.
you kind of lived it,
I think
in
so.
ways that a lot of people don't. So,
Yeah.
especially
And
early on.
even, like things that somebody will like suggest doing at conferences and stuff. I'm just like, I do that. Or I don't do that because this is why I don't do that because I thought about that already. And like I did that, like, there's very rare, I don't want to sound like this, but it's rare to hear like a new
Um,
idea that I
Novel.
haven't at least seen, thought of, done, or already do,
Yep. Yep.
you know?
Okay. Think about, I love asking this question to folks who do have quite a bit of experience, and you definitely fall in that category. What would you say if you had, a bunch of college students in a room together, and they're at that stage, not having gotten their first jobs yet, but are like entrepreneurial. Like they're like, if I don't start my business right out of school, it's going to be soon. what kind of advice would you give them? What kind of master class would you give them if you had 30 minutes with them?
I would tell them first, I would tell them to get a job first. I think it's very like
Okay.
so. I would because I think it's really important to get some sort of job, and even if it's a bad job, I've always said this. Like even if like it's good to experience a really terrible manager or
Sure.
an environment where it's toxic. Like all of that, you could take for good to be like, I never want it to be this way. So and you only learn. I'm the exact example of learning through experience. So that's why I'm going to say that because I've seen so many different. I've worked at 6, 7, 8 companies. I don't even know, right? But I've
Yeah.
seen good, I've seen bad, and all the above. So I think experience is really important. And through that experience, I think it's really good to be creative, even if you're on the lower end of the totem pole when you start, and constantly thinking of what you would do differently if you were in charge. So I think it's so important. And I've told people this, what would you like have the mindset of if I was running this company, what would I be doing differently? And if you were running the company, there's a lot more questions that you're going to ask. Why do we do things this way? Who does this? After I do this, then what happens? Who does it go to? Things like that. Yet you wouldn't otherwise ask unless you were putting yourself in the shoes of I'm running the company. So I was doing that when I joined the small CPA firm space where I was asking questions that nobody would ever ask. But I was like, wait, how does it get to me? Who's closing the sales? What happens when I'm done with it and I pass it along? Who actually files this? How do we get paid? Are we getting like those are questions that it was my first year in a small accounting firm, but I had 11 years experience. That's questions that even somebody a year out of college should be asking themselves, like
Sure.
at the end of the day and thinking, another example is, okay, whatever the business you're going to start is, or whatever your idea is, at the end of the day, explain it like you're running a lemonade stand. What's the product or service? How are you getting it? What are you paying for it? What are you going to sell it for? How are you going to sell it? And where are you going to sell it? Like just run through in that dumb level because it's actually very important. And I've had people tell me ideas where I'm just like, I don't, how is that going to make money? Well,
Hmm.
it's going to be really cool, but I'm like, but who pays you money? Well, they're all going to pay, but you're telling me that someone's going to sell something and then somebody else is going to buy it. They're going to exchange. Where do you make money? Well, no, so it's just like, it's shocking, but it's just like, it's not thought of. It's this whole elaborate idea that they've spent hundreds of hours on and they can't tell you how it's going to make money.
Yeah.
And in the absence of and it's like, oh, but we'll hire, you know, IT people and data engineers and all this stuff. I'm like, with what money? Um, are you getting a loan? Are you getting but people don't think this through. So I think it's like, whatever idea it is, I think getting experience is very helpful. And then again, even if it's not in the business or the idea that, you plan to ultimately go into, having the business mindset is something that applies to any business, no matter what,
Hmm.
I guess that's the best I could give it at, and just constantly asking questions and thinking if you were in charge, what would you need to know? Trying to understand how the business operates fully. And at the end of the day, how do they get money? How do they pay for their expenses? How do they keep afloat? Those are things I didn't think of until, 5 years into my career.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I remember when I was first going into the initial interviews, I would talk about how I had a business owner mindset, and
Hmm.
I'm thinking about that as I listen to you, and I think it was a it was foreshadowing for me of ultimately being frustrated with my business owner mindset to the point where I was like, I gotta just do my own thing. I gotta be
Yeah.
a business owner again.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, that is a superpower
Yes.
when going into interviews. I feel like is
Yeah.
and especially if you can demonstrate it, like later
Oh
on, because
yeah.
I do really
Oh
appreciate,
yeah.
like even if you're a lower level, if you're asking those questions, people are like, oh, this guy or gal is different. We
Hmm.
sometimes
Oh,
it's met with
absolutely.
a lot of friction, right? But
Yeah.
it shows something. It shows something about who you are as a person. So
Absolutely. It could be
love that
met
about
with friction from like a manager who's never thought about it, of like making it to like owner partner level. Like they might see that as weird, but if it's any legit like owner type, or they're going to love that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's great. Excellent. Well, let's transition a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about your tax firm, and then talk about your new
Sure.
venture as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, going back to this journey of starting the tax firm, what have been your biggest wins? I've seen you post a lot of cool stuff on LinkedIn over the last, year as I've been following you. What are some of the biggest wins you'd point to with your own firm?
Yeah, I think I actually posted about this week, I think, of some of like the wins. So some of the things that I like, not everything turns out to be right. Like I came in and these were my ideas and some worked and some didn't. And some new things happened that I wasn't expecting that worked. But the biggest one for me was just realizing that I could convince business clients to let me do a bundled package for a monthly fee where I'm doing their bookkeeping, I'm doing their tax returns and general advisory. That was my biggest win, and I'm all relationship driven, whereas most firms are not, where they're more productized, where it's just send me the stuff at the end of the year, we'll give you a tax return. I wanted to build my firm on relationships. So
Mm,
I set up calls in, especially with the first clients early on every 2 weeks. Even if there's nothing to talk about, tell me about your day. I don't care, because I wanted them to feel comfortable enough that when they did have a question, they would ask me. Because I learned that if they feel more comfortable, that they ask you the stupid thing first before they go and do it, and then you have to fix it and spend a ton of time fixing it. So I just want, and most of the time, these questions take 30 seconds to respond to. They're not difficult. They're not highly complicated, and so that kind of win was important for me. Whereas other firms thought that would be too time consuming. You'd have to bill hourly for that. How do you do it? And I was like, my thought was it's not that complicated, and it's not. It's you have to build the relationship. You have to get the person to trust you and feel comfortable coming to you about anything. So that's a big one. And then I guess getting higher end clients, and that's some of the positioning I've more recently run into where which has been my goal, but now I'm starting to get a lot more traction with it of, business owners and younger in their early to mid 40s who have a couple of successful operating businesses, a couple buildings, a couple rental properties, and just a lot more going on than a normal, this guy owns a business. And with them taking what I just described to the next level of being like, I'm your go-to. I'm the quarterback. Even if it's something that doesn't have to do with me, bring it to me so I can digest it, get back to you, and maybe I could pull in somebody from my network, that could assist with something if it's outside my area. But
mm,
I think I'm really relationship driven. If you can build that relationship to a point where you become kind of indispensable,
right.
good luck. Those are so sticky and strong. And that's really, look, and there's people who will criticize that because they're like, the owner needs to be out of the business. And I get that, but I mean, I'm not even 40 years old, so I got plenty of time left to work. I don't care. But also, I have a team that does the work. Hey, that leads into the segue of the third thing I'd be proud of. So I run a contractor model, which I was adamant about, fully remote, where I didn't see the need for full-time employees as you're growing a firm when it's a fully remote world. And I could actually overpay for people on a contract level, on like a retainer level, be like, I'm going to pay you for 10 hours every week. And it's my job to get you those 10 hours. Now, what's crazy is people think that's insane because there's weeks where I only have 2 hours, they only have 2 hours of work, but they're getting paid for 10 essentially. But what that means is if I have a new client come in like I did 2 weeks ago, who's going to be a big client, I already have my team on retainer. I don't got to go find them. I don't got to ask, hey, can you give me 20 hours next week? They're already there. And they're jumping in and prioritizing immediately because I've been paying them every week. I'm paying for that kind of retainer and their ability to be ready. And with that, even it's a fractional basis, and I'll just name like the admin aspect. So if I had to go get an admin, my choices are no admin at all. So I
Mm,
spend $0, but then I do all the administrative work. Or do I hire a full-time admin? I don't know, 50, 60K a year with, payroll taxes, benefits, and BS. With the risk of them leaving because they could get a job offer for, 68 and be gone, right? Or I could pay somebody fractionally $50 an hour, spend $26,000 a year on it, and get like a really good one who's going to be all over everything. I don't care that she gets paid more per hour than anyone else will give her. It's still costing me only 26K, where my other options were 0 and now I do all the work, or 50, 60 with a turnover risk. So
mm.
there's things like that where I feel like a lot of people haven't caught up to this, but I think it's so obvious. And those I'd say were my, wins that jump out, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. I heard you say earlier, and I've seen this pop up as well as I've followed you, but I guess the CFO advisory maybe was what you started with and you
Yeah,
pivoted away from that at one
yeah,
point. I was curious to ask when I heard you talk about the bundles. You
yeah.
mentioned tax books and just general advisory. What's the difference for you between general advisory and CFO advisory?
So I call it. I don't. I call it. I will include like CFO advisory in there and general advisory, but what I don't include anymore is fractional CFO. So I had
Okay.
a client in my first year that I was doing fractional CFO, and it was probably not an ideal fit anyway. And it's a bad example for those who are aspiring to be fractional CFOs. Having said that, I think it was just kind of like, a blessing in disguise and a warning to me to not do it or whatever. And I took it as a sign. But and it was my biggest client at the time, it was $5,000 a month. So I was ecstatic about it. But it was a toxic team. They were always angry at each other. Every email, like, so it was everything I tried to get away from. It was, every email was like aggressive. And I'm like,
Oh
what am I
gosh.
even walking into? And then it was also like, oh, you're the fractional CFO. We throw everything to you. Like, hey, we have this issue with like New York State sales tax where something got registered wrong, and they're expecting me to spend 6 hours like figuring it out. So it was stuff like that where I'm like, I am not, I guess it's the unpredictability of like what I consider true fractional CFO, where when I say now CFO advisory or general advisory, I mean it more. And I say it like, hey, I used to be like a CFO. So I will look at your stuff from a CFO perspective. I'm not
Yep.
doing budgets. I'm not doing forecasts. I'm not doing cash flow analysis. I'm not helping you get a loan, like, things like that. That's where I'm differentiating from like what a true like CFO type service would be. Or I'm not going to help you get acquired or help you buy a company. I can help from a high level, sure. But even I had a client that they are getting acquired, and they started asking me detailed questions, the due diligence, and
Mm.
I straight up said like, look, I don't even want to come up with an arrangement for you to pay me to help with this. I flat out, I like laughed. I was like, I don't want to do any of this. Like, I'm just so over. I think it's also because my career was in that. I'm so
Yeah.
over that stuff. But anyway, if that helps to explain it all,
Sure.
um, I just think just the basic bookkeepings, tax returns, and more general advisory, which is just relationship, ask me questions. And I naturally will pick up stuff where I'm like, oh, they're having a good month. Or, oh, hey, why is revenue down? You're having a bad, where'd cash? Like, I will ask that stuff. But
Mhm.
that to me that's what I consider a CFO advisory, where it's just like, I see it, it's obvious, I pick it up on the numbers, and I'm going to ask about it. And it's like, oh, well, this happened. Oh, okay, got it.
Yep. Yep. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, I've wrestled with that, the questions of how to describe things and how to protect time. As
Yeah.
a fledgling firm owner, it's like fractional implies part time.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, and it gets the scope creep gets to be a
Yeah.
big issue oftentimes.
Hmm.
And how to describe that and keep yourself, and it's also just hard to delegate, at the end of the day. Like
Yeah.
it's a difficult thing. So I think um I've met plenty of fractional CFOs who are like actually fractional CFOs, but the
Yeah.
other thing that I look at is because of the lack of delegation, it's like they're limited to 4 or 5 clients at a time,
Yeah.
right? And they might
Yeah.
be getting paid 5,000 a month or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But that still kind of puts a cap on your earning potential as much as
Absolutely.
and for those who want to grow significantly into the future, it's like, well, that's kind of hard to do. Great experience, but not positioned for like enterprise value kind of building.
Yeah, and the best I've seen do it are more controller level, like people
Okay.
who don't do tax, but it's more kind of controller level stuff where they can do like, where they could just make sure the accurate books and that like integration or, for larger businesses that need, a little more than just cash basis booked for tax purposes. I've seen people have more success. Not that they're not out there for the full blown fractional CFO. They clearly are. I just don't, that's not my wheelhouse as much. But I've seen a lot of success with people doing bookkeeping or controller level, like, hey, it's definitely a step up from just bookkeeping, but it's not quite CFO where
Right.
we're like in, meeting with your board and doing all this other stuff. And, like,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay, so what about on the challenges side? What have been some of the biggest challenges you've had as you started out?
let's see. I just wrote about this. What did, oh, So I thought I would help startups. That was going to be like my niche, was like new business owners and startups. And then that was like my biggest takeaway, that I realized it's almost like a business needs to first experience what a bad kind of CPA looks like, and feels like, and what it results in,
Mm,
because they don't truly, respect and value it otherwise. Because you're like, if you're really good and it's their first experience with this, um, they don't really know how much better it is than the typical person.
sure.
And in addition to that, they don't want to pay, or they can't pay, and they don't have the
Right.
money. And it's a lot more work than an established business, because they have a lot of questions and they're going to make mistakes. You don't want them to make those mistakes, because it's just going to cost you more time later and you're not going to be able to bill for them. But you really like what they're doing because you like entrepreneurs and you want to help them. But it's this tough, like, push and pull,
Hmm.
where that was a big one for me, because I had it planned out. I thought I was just going to niche in startups and new businesses, and I was going to just wipe the floor, and they would grow and I would grow with them. And it would be like, oh my God, you're getting in at the ground level. And that did not materialize at all. Even like legit startups, not even just like new business owners, like legit startups, like AI database startups that are looking to get, like, they're going to get $20 million funding. What ends up happening? They don't get the funding. And now you've
Hmm.
spent freaking 70 hours building stuff with them on the hopes of getting paid. Now so that's out the door. The other thing, the big one, was like, for me, this isn't everybody, but like marketing and stuff. So I on LinkedIn, obviously I'm active, but I've gotten maybe two clients from LinkedIn. It's more just professional networking, I found, for um, that LinkedIn has been. And I went into this thinking, I'm going to do what these other firms didn't do, and I'm going to build like an engine, and I'm going to get a lot of organic, leads and stuff from Google, from social media, and all these things. And that did not turn out to be the case. And I feel like I'm not speaking for everybody, but I feel like because of what I do and it's more relationship driven, that I used to hate on referral only, but I'm basically referral only.
Sure.
And now I almost have positioned that into a source of like pride and premium, where it's like, you can't really get in unless like it's through somebody who's like already knows me. Um, but that was another one. I had to admit defeat there, because I was just, the referrals I would get organically were just, there's 10 times the amount of them, and they're all way better than a random person who reaches out.
Hmm. What was that initial, thinking about what you're saying about referrals and marketing and the challenge there, and then even what you had said previously about, starting off with the fractional CFO stuff and not working out like you had thought. What was that first year or two like? Was it highly like anxiety inducing to like go through that process of like, "Oh, I don't have the clients that I thought I would," or like that type of thing?
So the other thing I didn't mention, but I should have, is that I've had contracting income during this whole time. So I
Mm,
haven't been, that would be the biggest thing. And that leads into the new business I launched. But
right.
it's like, because I had that lined up, and that was with the firm that I was going to be made partner at. And we're good friends now, still to this day. And I still do contract work there because the money's too good. But I'm almost like an operating partner on contract.
Sure.
So that alleviated any stress of me needing to go out and take on any client. So because of that, I was still able to be very selective and not really have to put myself out there as much. And like I did though, like I made business cards and I went around to businesses, I handed them out. I went to the networking things. Like I said though, like none of those really yielded much. It was all through organic relationships I already had professionally and personally that yielded my, clients. And then from there they referred, and from there they referred. So I just thought that was interesting. But, you know, I still, at its core, at the core, there were, I was doing minimum fees of like $1,500 for a personal return. In the first year, yeah, I had several that were $700, $600, but there was maybe 10 of those, and there's only two left, because I even honestly told those people at the time, yeah, I'm happy to do it this year, but just so you know, this is what I focus on. It's business owners, it's books, da da da. And they all actually just like left with like no hard feelings, because they should have been paying much less, and even at $700, they we're used to paying 350, but they were just in a bind. So we left with no hard feelings. They left good reviews, things like that. Um, but I always was trying to get the businesses to do books, taxes, maybe fractional CFO, things like that. and I guess I was fortunate to get them. So I didn't, again, because of the supplemental contract income, I guess I didn't like, I was just learning on the fly with my still ideal kind of set of circumstances at play where I'm charging higher fees, even if it's tax return only, it's still a good fee or a decent fee, and just figuring it out. Um,
Hmm.
it's a lot easier solo. I actually thought it was more challenging this past year when I built a team of five. Like I have a team of five now, and delegating and having to get different platforms to watch the workflow management and things like that. That's been way more challenging for me to figure that part out.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, the contract work is, I think, one thing that like just is so unique about your brand, and certainly something I've seen you post a lot about, and
Yeah.
certainly something that plays into what we want to get into with the new venture as well, which we'll get there. But I'm curious, having considered that for myself along the way as I've started my firm, how do you navigate the conversations around like I don't know, the competition aspect of things? Because you're working for somebody who's also your competitor, right? And they're
Yeah.
letting you work for them, and you're competing. And you're a highly relational guy, right? So like
Yeah.
you're talking to their clients,
Yeah.
there's this tension. What I'm sure there is, what does that look like?
I mean, so in the case, like, the people who work for me are similar. They have their own clients and their own firms in one sense or another, whether it's a bookkeeper or my tax manager, he has his own firm. Um, for me, with that firm where I'm doing it, I literally just had a hard, I'm not taking any of your clients. Like we just have a handshake agreement, and I wouldn't because he pays me too well, and we're like friendly. It's again,
Sure.
so my whole thing is to break down, and it was because of the experience I had. It's to break down the typical employer employee kind of contract and like getting one over on each other, where it's more like handshake, like let's just be good humans to each other. And I know it
Mhm.
sounds like weird or phony or fake, but it's not. So with him, I literally would never take a client that came from him. Um, and I try to do my best for his clients. That firm doesn't run on super good relationships though. So it's a decent fit because a lot of the clients that I have from that firm are ones that are his that he kind of threw at me to help with the work that I've done that. But a lot of what I do is also operating the firm, helping implement new tech, figuring out like who's going to work on it, how, like, I'm kind of helping manage it a little bit. So it's a
Sure.
little bit different. And with my firm, and thinking of, my tax director, for example, who has his own firm who reviews all my tax returns and stuff. He actually doesn't deal with any of the clients. I still hold the relationships, but he's reviewing all the tax returns, things
I
like that.
see.
And my accounting manager, she does deal with the clients, but she's doing bookkeeping. She's following up with unknown transactions and getting certain statements or figuring out, hey, this is a new vehicle purchase, getting the docs. I get like, good luck if you want to steal my client. A, you're fired. B, you're a bad person. C, I doubt they're going to go with you. But it's a risk I'm willing to take, I guess, is my point. I'm
Sure.
confident enough in my ability and my clients, and I've sold these clients and they're there for me, and I'm still the primary on the relationship that, I'm good with it. And I think I'm a little different though than a lot of other firms where they have a ton of clients and it's not built on a strong relationship. So it's more, hey, there was a sales process with this one guy, but then immediately I have this person emailing me, and they've never really built a good relationship. So in that case, it might be a little more strained if that person did leave. Now they would look at that person who's been emailing them for all those months as the primary versus the guy who sold them, who they talked to once and then left. I think that's the dynamic too.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if that helps answer, but
No, yeah, that's great. That's great. So with your own firm, with the new hires, well, I guess they're not new hires anymore, I'm sure, but like I'm thinking about that initial point at which you decided to build a team. What was that like? What was the precipitating event there of like, all right, I'm ready to hire somebody, and I'm gonna hire them contract, and then I'm gonna do it 5 times. I'm gonna do it again 5 times, or whatever it was.
yeah. So the first, it was kind of in an order. The first was an offshore bookkeeper.
Okay.
So that was the first. And then everybody since then is onshore. But what I wanted at that point, I had like 15 bookkeeping clients, and I developed my process and my system. And I was like, you know what? If I just went in every day and I categorized every day, it would take me like 15, 20 minutes a morning, and I'm done. And I don't have to worry about doing it once a week and it taking 4 hours. I was like, if I could do this every day, it's only going to cost me 20 days to log into each, make rules, da 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 da. So
Right.
that's all they were doing, offshore bookkeeper, which was a huge help, by the way, because now that even though it's 20, 30 minutes a day, it's alleviating that for me. So that was the first step, being like, okay, at least all these are going to be categorized. And if they didn't know how to categorize something, I was like, just put it to an Ask My Accountant account. Don't even guess. Don't even try. Don't use your judgment. Just put it there. I'll figure it out. And my next hire was accounting manager, because I want now, and then at a point I had 20, 25 of these, and I didn't want to keep looking and emailing clients every week, like, hey, what's this for? What's that for? I was like, I need to get out of this. So that was the second hire, which was, the offshore bookkeeper was, say, 7 months in, and the accounting manager was a year and 6 months in, right? So in the first year and a half, those are the only two. And then, so now I'm out of the bookkeeping. And then towards the summer of last year, so like a year and 8 months in, a year and 9 months in, is when I brought on admin and kind of tax preparer. And then at the beginning of this year was the tax manager to help with
Okay.
reviewing all tax returns. So if that makes sense, it's kind of like, I look at my firm like, if I had a $20 million firm, it would be broken up into those roles. There would be a bookkeeping division, then there would be a management level above the bookkeeping that manages it. Then there would be a tax division, where tax prep and a manager above that managing the tax prep, and then there'd be an admin, and then there's me. So I'm trying to build that fractional, like contract fractionally, though, with how I know a business should be built, like what it ultimately should look like.
Mhm.
I'm just building it kind of fractionally very early on, which I think is unique. Um, and I could go on and on about why it's bad, why I think it's bad to hire. Like the other options are, somebody hires a full-time person and tries to make them do 4 roles, and they're not really good at any of the 4, but they're doing bookkeeping and they're doing invoicing and they're doing like, I like my way a lot better, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's unique, but I think it seems like the future, and that leads us to,
Yeah.
your newest brainchild venture,
Hmm.
Intervaris. Is that
Yeah,
how
there
it's
you go.
said? Okay,
Yeah.
Intervaris. Um, I'm so excited about it, and honestly,
Yeah.
that's I've just been on the edge of my seat, like watching it, and then
Nice.
watching, like getting a chance to talk to you about it today. I think this is
Yeah.
huge. And I think, I mean, it really hinges, it sounds like, around the role of the tax manager. So maybe the
Yeah.
first question is, coming out of your experience now, having hired a tax manager, but then also doing everything else fractionally, um, yeah, why is that? Why is that where you decided to focus on with this new venture, and why is that like the hinge point in typical
Yep.
small accounting firms?
So I think it's a couple of reasons. So I've been floating with ideas because I had a LinkedIn following and I have so many people messaging me, and I wanted to help, and I was floating with like a mentorship idea, a community, and these things. I was like, I really don't want to do that. I don't really feel like that's what my calling is. And then it kind of hit me because I had so many people messaging me that I just stopped reading messages back in like September of 2020. Was it 4 or 5? 2024. Yeah,
Wow.
so I just stopped reading messages, somewhere around there, okay?
Okay.
Um, because it was just too much, and I was spending a lot of time, because I can't just respond, they respond like, "Hey," and they ask for advice, and they write a long thing, and then I write a lot, like, it's time consuming,
Right.
and there's literally, like, you know, say at least a few dozen a week of legit ones, not like, random, like, solicitations, like, legit people asking for advice, so I just couldn't do it anymore, it was way too much. So I turned that off, but then occasionally I would click and I would read one, and I'd be like, "Ugh," like I almost feel an obligation and a responsibility that I need to do something, because I would have people like crying out for help, like a mother who's not seeing her children, who's looking for a better way, and what advice do I have? And I'm like, you know. So the idea was kind of born with one saying like, okay, there's so many people who want advice on how to start a firm, but obviously there's different types: bookkeeping, CFO, tax, blah, blah, blah. Now I ultimately had to wind down and say, like, it needs to be a tax firm, because that's really kind of the niche I've went into, and that's what I'm doing. And then simultaneously, every firm I know that's established cannot find a tax manager, or they find one, they pay a big recruiter fee, and they're gone within 2 years. And then I'm looking back through my LinkedIn messages, and I'm seeing all these tax managers who are asking me about how to start their own firm, and where do they get contract income, supplemental income. So I'm like, hey, on this side I have all these firms looking for tax managers, and on this side I have all these tax managers looking to start their firm and get contract income. So I was like, I could just be the matchmaker, right? Like that would make sense. So
Yep.
that's the basis of the idea. And I could go like further, I feel like AI, tech and automation and offshoring is going to take away a lot of the entry level and data, entry and all that with the tax returns. And the only like the biggest, if not already, but it will be if it's not already this, and I think it already is this, the tax manager, tax reviewer is going to be the most crucial position because the underlying stuff could kind of be automated and it looks like it's going in that direction. But the judgment and the human aspect of just let's get eyes on this before I sign off on it needs to be a human. So that's where
Hmm.
I think it's going also. Um, but yeah, that's how I was born. And it's funny, I went through my LinkedIn messages, so it took me like 40, 50 hours to go through all of them. And unfortunately, there's plenty of people who had messaged me looking for advice, but I only responded to those who had a CPA or EA in their title and who specifically reached out about starting a firm and or looking for contract income. And of that, we created like a Microsoft form, blah, blah. Anyway, we had 100 over 120 people fill it out who fit all these qualifications, who are CPA or EAs, who have like 10 plus years, which is crazy, right? Who have 10 plus
Yeah.
years of experience in the US, all this stuff, right? Who have prepared returns, reviewed returns, specialized in tax. And I did not expect to have that many. I was thinking maybe there'd be 20. So I was like, oh God, now this is like, I didn't realize how big this could be. So from there, because it was also, you got to build the supply side first, right? I can't go out to firms and be like, I got tax managers, but I don't have tax managers. So side one was build the supply. And from there, we did vetting where they would meet and do a personality, but just a vibe check with one of my admin who helps handles a lot of that. And then we did a technical and like evaluation with my tax director, who's the co-founder of Intervaris, doing kind of a technical evaluation, asking some technical tax questions to see. And, not everybody passes that, especially somebody coming from a large firm. They don't have the generalist background to advise a small business. So even though they're probably very highly paid and director level at a top 10 firm, they're not passing our evaluation. Whereas like a typical staffing company that has contract people, like all these people are going to be accepted because they're licensed, right? And they're looking for
Right.
work. So out of 120, I think we have like 12 or 14 who passed, right?
Wow.
That are now part of the initial community and group. And with that, we've set up a Slack group and we have weekly video meetings where we're just building the community first. So we have all these people because the goal is it's a community that's then one at a time they're going to be deployed out. So now we're looking for the firms, and in theory, you'd have 14 of these people. We're all in the Slack group. We're all meeting every week. We're all talking. We're talking about tax issues, problems, suggestions. And then when they each get deployed to a firm, it's going to be backed by an entire community that's all working together. So it's going to be so much more productive and efficient and higher quality than what a firm would get on their own from a full-time hire or a random contract hire in itself. And we're also producing standardized review formats and checklists, not like AI, but like we're like humanize what we
Right.
look out for, strategies missed, how do we check stuff. So that combination, I know for a fact, like there's going to be nothing that can compete with it. It's just that we need there's two types of firm targets who are going to be interested in this. And ironically, the newer firm owners are all about it because they get it instantly and they realize, hey, I could grow a lot quicker if I had somebody backing me up and reviewing everything. So I had that quality control and I can go grow the firm and manage it. But firms that are 400 to like 800K of revenue, they all want to do it. Um, it's the $2 to $5 million firms who I thought would be the ideal client profile that are like 30 years old who can't get a tax manager, or they're hiring a new tax manager every 2 years because there's turnover and they're paying recruiter fees and they're paying 200K a year. It's very difficult to convince them. They cannot, it's like their brain does like a twitch in the circuit when I explain it because they cannot understand what I'm explaining, where I'm like, no, but it's contract. But like, yeah, but it's a set hours a week. And it's like, yeah, but they're back, but like they can't grasp it. And it's just your typical accountant speak where, somebody who's just been doing the same thing for 30 years, like it's wild. But a lot of them cannot, comprehend it. But I'll pause there. But that's the whole idea,
Yeah.
right? We're the middle entity. We're matchmaking, but it's backed by a community, standards and like, best practices. And we're always working with each other. And therefore it removes turnover risk because if somebody were to it would be stupid for them to leave because they're getting paid a lot for fractional 10 to 20 hours a week. So it's also their lifeline. So the incentives align, right? Because they're starting on their own. Why are they going to give this up? They shouldn't. It's also a community for them. So why would they give that up? So the incentives are so strong to produce. One of the biggest risks is turnover risk and dependency risk on the tax manager anyway. So like my whole thing is we alleviate all of that with the
Hmm.
highest quality, with the premium person that we've already vetted. So we're getting somebody that you can't even get in your search because they're the highest level and they want to start their own thing. And we're stacking up all the incentives for why this person's going to stay and why they're going to work super hard and also why they're going to be more efficient and higher quality and all these things. And my guess is like whoever starts using this, they're going to have such an advantage just because I know who the people are and I know what we're building.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, as a
Mm.
new firm owner myself, it makes total sense, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
of those,
Right.
I'm one of those newbies, and I'm so curious about that because it's like,
Yeah.
it seems to me that, and I've talked to plenty of our peers, who
Hmm.
are at that like future stage, right? Which
Yeah.
is the 2 to 5, and they're established and they're doing great, and it's just like the common story is just like
I
so.
know.
I've passed your name along several times,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
surprising to me, right? And it's just like, man, we're looking for a tax manager. Man, we want to grow, but
Right.
I'm just like
Right.
too busy. I'm in the details, blah
Yep.
blah blah. And I'm like this is what you need. So it's really surprising to me to hear
It's
that those are the
fascinating.
firms that are so
Yep.
like, I don't know, hard to convince, I guess.
Yep.
I wonder if I mean I wonder if it has to do with like the idea of paying somebody to be available when they may not be producing value.
Yeah.
Like in that sense of like, because to me that makes total sense. Like I'm paying not just for them to do hours of work, but I'm paying for the circumstances that pops up that, like you were saying earlier, like I get a new client, I need them to step in, and I'm like paying for that availability. It's like paying someone on a retainer. That's like the whole idea,
Yeah.
right? But I
Yeah.
think maybe so many of those legacy firms, legacy is maybe a strong word. Some people are gonna get really
Yeah.
offended, but legacy firm, like they're thinking like, hey, this has to be a productive hour. I'm not paying for it unless it's a productive hour, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you resonate with that? Have you
Yeah,
sensed
yeah.
that for them?
So I think what some of them think that, but my whole counter to that is like, wait. So, and it's like peak versus non-peak hours, right? So the options and peak is defined like I'm a simplicity guy, so I'm like 26 weeks a year is peak, 26 non-peak, and peak is
Sure.
January through April, August through October during extension season. Everything else is non-peak, and it ends up being 26 and 26 weeks, right? So my whole thing is like, all right, peak is either 10 to 20 hours a week. Like there's three packages, 10, 20, or 25 hours a week is peak season. There's nobody complaining that they'll need people for those hours during peak seasons, right? Non-peak could be 5 to 10, right? Wow, there is people who are like, well, what am I going to use for that? Well, if you have a full-time person, what are they doing, man? Like for 40, like if you can't find something for somebody to do for 5 hours a week, and that's your like big concern, what are you paying somebody 40 hours a week, right? So I think there's like a big disconnect there, and them not fully trusting, which I could get this part, like them not trusting when I'm kind of like, I'm telling you we're going to be 2 to 3x as fast at 2 to 3x the quality. And I get that, but like we are, like I know like these people, like I guarantee you if they had a full-time search, any one of the people on this would be their number one hire and they would give any offer they could to get them. So, there's an array of differences. What I suspect is going, so we're launching January 1st, like not launching, like that's when we want our first thing. What we want to do though is have like a couple pilot firms that need help during extension season just to like, test it out in real time. But all the smaller firms who are interested, they don't need help during extension season yet, like at this point, because they're mostly through the stuff. So they're all verbal yeses to start in January 1st. The larger firms who desperately need somebody, though, they're going to do it, right? Like they're going to join, but only last minute because they have no other choice and they've exhausted all other like avenues, but they're going to do it reluctantly. But it's going to be like they're going to end up being fortunate for that because they're going to experience it and see it. But the other thing I would say is the proof, like we have proof of concept. You want to use my firm? Okay, I'm 2.5 years in and I got out of all the tax review which has been incredible, by the way. And also because now I have peace of mind, like, okay, it's all being reviewed, but also there's more technical stuff. As you know, I'm not a tax background. So my tax director is doing all these form filings, 3115, stuff like that, that I would be so stressed out trying to figure out how exactly to do that from a technical perspective, hands it all off. All reviewing new client tax return, handles all of it, helping mentor and train the tax preparer, handle, like, so from that perspective, I'm like, this opens me up even to getting more technically complicated clients that I otherwise wouldn't feel comfortable doing, right? So I just feel like it blows the doors off of what I can do. And I'm already, because of that, at a different level for being
Well,
a couple years, 3 years in. I'm going to be probably at least at $1 million of revenue this year. Um, and the established firm, the other guy that I still am connected to, he's essentially a contractor model. He has me, and most of the people he has are contractor models, and he's overpaying them at CPA level, to be fractional, and they could have their own clients on the side. And now he doesn't work 5 hours a week, and he nets a lot of money for a $4 million firm. So it's like, I know it works, so I'm not going to go over the top trying to convince people that it works. And I
sure.
know what we have, so we're going to land the people, and it's just, we're going to sit back and wait for it to come to us, because we know, like,
Yeah.
and it'll be cool. It'll be cool though once, I part of me secretly hopes it's the new people who take them all up. So like, then they can kind of brag and blow past the legacy people who weren't willing to trust it.
Well, yeah, no, I think as if the engagement on your posts is any judge, or and even if just the interest I've been
Yeah.
able to see organically in my own conversations is any judge, I think it's going to take off. I
Yeah. I hope so.
really am impressed by it, and yeah, even just to hear the backstory is really cool. Like to see how you were kind of
Yeah.
that. Uh, you didn't even expect to be the bridge, but you kind of became that because of your
Yeah.
platform and all those unread messages. I mean, what a
Crazy.
story there,
And that's another, like, I've had the questions of like, how you find, like, people who are looking for full-time managers and cannot find qualified candidates, and then them just being so skeptical, like, how are you even finding these people? And again, I get it, it's unbelievable, but it's like, they're all in my messages, man. Like,
Right.
like I didn't need to go anywhere for them. I didn't
Yeah.
need to pay anybody. I just needed to go to my LinkedIn messages.
Yep.
Um, so it's just interesting, it's fortunate, but that's the best part of the LinkedIn for me, has been this.
Yeah. Another question I'm thinking of that some of these legacy partners may have.
Hmm.
One, obviously, there's a benefit to not having a manager that's going to be on the partner track. Like that's
Yeah.
huge. Like full stop. Just an incredible benefit to working with a firm like yours,
Yeah.
uh, with a solution like Intervaris. Like, but then I'm sure there's the questions in some firms where they may have need for multiple tax managers, right? And maybe they
Mhm.
have a couple full time. They have some others who are like, are there any dynamics that you've run into where, there's just risk of other people getting miffed, right? That other people, like people are being brought in ahead of them, or, those types of dynamics that you have
So
counseled people on in firms you've talked to. Do
I
you know what I'm
spoke to
saying?
one guy. I thought it was really interesting. So he's like at a wealth management company that's merged with tax, and they're expanding pretty quickly. And he's the head of like the tax, and they brought in two full-time tax managers underneath.
Okay.
But they're growing so quickly that he's like, it sucks finding tax managers. He's like, so I'd like to just use you guys, if that's like, so that's a larger firm, they're not really a legacy firm, because he just gets it and they're expanding. Where he's like, shit, if I could be on top, have two full-time managers, and then get like two or three of your people underneath to help with capacity and just excess stuff, like that's a golden situation for me. And then that de-risks from, if one of our full-time managers were to leave, at
Sure.
least we've got, like, so they're thinking of it as a capacity play in that sense, and it makes a lot of sense. Other firms I've explained it to, like, if they, ones that are, some that are big enough where they have multiple managers. I mean, in my head, I'm just like, these firms don't want to give away partner equity anyway. So I'm like, this is your goal, like, this is your dream come true. I don't know if this is answering your question, but it's like, I guess if there's somebody who wants to, are you saying like, if there's somebody who's like a senior associate who wants to get promoted to manager, but now they can't because there's this here?
Potentially, yeah. I mean,
I hadn't
I
thought
just
of
think,
that.
just
Good
team
question.
dynamics in general can be a challenge if
Yeah,
you've got a mix between full timers and fractional people, and if your model is what it is, like I could see that it would raise some eyebrows with some full timers who
yeah.
were hoping to be on the partner track and that type of thing. Could be a strategic risk for just your
For
existing
sure,
people.
yeah, they should come join the Intervaris team as a manager.
There you
If
go.
that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I
Mhm.
love it. You're just gonna like
We got a better
scoop up
option.
everybody.
Yeah. Look, that's I we'll see.
I love
I
it.
would love nothing more than for this to be the default, you
Yeah.
know. But again, there's only so many, because like the one thing, it has to be quality. So it's no matter
Right.
what, like I don't know, I'd estimate this is totally made up, but let's say there's 20,000 tax manager positions in the US. We don't have 20,000 elite people, maybe at the height we could get a few hundred, right? So no matter
Yeah.
what, there's going to be tax managers out there full time, plenty of them.
Well, it's the mix between being a tax manager, but then being an entrepreneur as well, because
Correct.
these people are not gonna,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're gonna have all that requisite experience, but they're also gonna be wanting
Yes.
and motivated to start their own thing,
Yep.
which, yeah, there's not tons and tons and tons of those. I mean, there's a
No.
lot more right now than there used to be probably,
Yes.
but,
Yeah.
but
And all of them
in
have the same stories we talked about, right? Like the
right,
people who were
right,
passed over for partner, the people who are working these hours, they're not spending time with family, and they're just like, I'm done with this. Like
yeah,
all of them. And they're all really, like, I'm telling you, they're very, very talented. Yeah.
yes, yeah. Well, yeah, no, that's really exciting. What else, from your chair, because you do have a unique vantage point, like with a following on LinkedIn now, and just having been posting and working in this space for quite a while with a lot of unique experience. What do you think is the future of the small business accounting and tax industry? Like, obviously, we've talked about some of that. Intervaris is something, right? Part of that future.
Yeah.
What else? What else would you point
I
to?
mean, I think there's always going to be a place for a relationship. So even the older legacy firm in town, I think there's always going to be a place where somebody wants to talk to somebody locally and, have that relationship. And they could do things the old way, probably for another 40, 50 years and still get away with it just
Hmm.
because of the demand and, what that is and what that relationship is. So I think that will always still be there if somebody wants to. However, I think for anybody who's younger and entrepreneurial, I think you're going to see people start firms and leverage tech. I spoke to a guy yesterday, even who's doing this. He bought a legacy firm and he's just kind of gutting it and he's using all automation and technology where I think you could build the right systems in place where you can take on a ton of clients with automation, with technology, with AI, with offshore or anything. But I think you're going to see a lot of very successful solo shops and small shops that are just leveraging technology. And I think you're going to see a lot more of them
Hmm.
because there's the capacity to do it. And as these bigger firms are merging more and more, like today's CBiz,
I
was
saw that.
purchased by Grant Thornton, right? So you're going to get crumbs being dropped down because the service, isn't great there. I've gotten a client from CBiz that missed like, again, it just drives me crazy, like probably how many hours were spent, and they messed up the QBI deduction calculation, and it cost the client like $300,000, right? So,
Wow.
and that's like a CBiz client that was probably charging 80 grand, and it's like I could do that for 40, and I'm printing money. So I
Mhm.
think a lot of those are going to drip down. I think it's going to be a renaissance of smaller firms. Anybody who's entrepreneurial and tech forward. I think they're just going to be able to make a lot of money, and it's just, are they willing to take that leap? Um, and I think tax is the key indicator. Tax is so easy to sell because everybody needs it. And
Yep.
if you have a personality on top of it, anyway, that's what I think is going. I think my contractor model is ahead of its curve. I think more people will use that. I think the Intervaris, that like, look, I'm biased, but I think like that's more of the direction that things will go.
Yep.
You know,
Yep. Cool. Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and I think it's encouraging for folks who are
yeah,
also concerned about like the tech and the AI and all those things to hear that from there's people out there who are still really relationship focused, and
yeah,
I think I see that for sure as well.
yeah,
And we got to keep ourselves grounded in that. I think on some level.
absolutely.
What when you look to 5 years down the road for both your CPA firm, BPM CPA, and then Intervaris, where do you hope to be? What's the longer term vision?
I hope Intervaris, I would love it if Intervaris had 50 or 100 managers that are deployed at firms. That's what I would hope for that. Because what that would mean is there's 50 to 100 managers who now chose self-employment and have supplemental income and are building freedom and, something unique for their family and improving their lives. And on the other side, that's 50 to 100 firms that have a plug to a system that I think is going to improve their company and their employees and their whole morale in life. And then thinking of the impact that has on all the clients that all of these have and all the families, like I think that would be the most meaningful, impactful thing that could happen is the Intervaris play. With my firm, I'm good where I'm at. I just want to build unique, like if relationships come to me and I'm able to help like the ideal client profile that I'm looking for, I'm happy to grow. But I don't even care about growing too big,
Hmm.
I'll take it as it goes. Like, if I grew by 400K in revenue, I have a problem because now my contractor model is spread too thin and I have to change it, right? I have to either add hours or add a new person. And I'm good where I'm at.
Hmm.
So I'll deal with it as it happens, but I don't care if I stay exactly where I'm at or if I grow, whatever's meant to happen will happen. But I don't want to be a big firm, my own firm. I don't.
Hmm.
I like the
Hmm.
small aspect.
Sure, sure. Gives you opportunity to do these other side projects
Yeah,
that you
exactly.
get genius ideas about,
Right, right. We'll
Hey,
see.
this is so cool.
Yeah,
Brendan, what
man.
a pleasure.
Awesome.
I'm so glad that we got to talk
Same.
today, and yeah, just so much wisdom, I think, from you
Thank you.
to the audience, and hopefully a lot of people listen up, take
I hope
note,
so.
whether they're, at
Yeah.
that legacy firm, or they're
Yes,
starting out, or they're just wanting to learn about the tax industry in general. I think it was
absolutely.
great. So,
I
um,
appreciate you having me.
yeah, and I look forward to checking back in, in a future year to see how things are going, see how things have played out, and
Absolutely, man.
continue to follow along on the journey. So,
Cool.
gonna be continuing to send people your way, of
I
course.
appreciate it. Keep it going, man. We'll see. One will
But
hit.
yeah,
And
I hope
maybe
that
wait.
honestly, I hope that one of the guys that I send your way might be one of your first. I'd love
I
to
hope
see,
so.
like see a pilot in my own relational
I love
network
that.
sooner rather than later. So.
Absolutely. Cool, man.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
we'll wrap this one up for now, but thanks for your time.
Thanks. I appreciate it, dude. Have a good one.